Koori tribe. Koori is a demonym for Aboriginal Australians from a region that approximately corresponds to southern New South Wales and Victoria. The word Koori derives from the indigenous language Awabakal. For some people and groups, it has been described as a reclaiming of indigenous language and culture, as opposed to relying on European titles such as Aboriginal. There are about 500 different Aboriginal peoples in Australia, each with their own language and territory and usually made up of a large number of separate clans. Archaeologists believe that the Aboriginals first came to the Australian continent around 45,000 years ago. Aboriginals themselves, however, trace their creation back to the Dreamtime, an era long past when the Earth was first formed. One Aboriginal man explained it thus: "By dreaming we mean the belief that long ago these creatures started human society. They made all natural things and put them in a special place. These dreaming creatures were connected to special places and special roads or tracks or paths. In many places the great creatures changed themselves into sites where their spirit stayed. They have a special connection with everything that is natural. They see themselves as part of nature. All things on earth we see as part human. It is true that people who belong to a particular area are really part of that area, and if that area is destroyed, they are also destroyed. Their land was invaded from the end of the 18th century onwards, with catastrophic consequences for them." Like archetypal indigenous painting, Koori painting is based largely on dot work, done in earthy colors such as blacks, whites, reds, and browns. Some Koori elders identify this style as a means of reconnecting with traditional indigenous culture and ancestry. More unique to the Koori population is the prevalence of artistic shellcraft, using shells found in the coastal environment to decorate ornamental pieces. Documents from the 1880s detail Koori women selling shellcraft baskets and decorative shoes to settler women at markets in La Perouse and Circular Quay, a practice that appears unique to the Sydney area. Shellcraft has continued to be of importance to the modern Koori population, with a 2008 exhibit at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Sydney incorporating Indigenous shellcraft. In 2005, Koori shell artist Ismi Timbury won the Parliament of New South Wales Indigenous Art Prize for her shell-adorned model of the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The economic prevalence of Koori shellcraft, too, has increased in contemporary Indigenous art history. While in 2005, shellcraft shoes retailed for approximately $20 Australian, a pair sold for $140 Australian at a Sydney gallery in 2009. Also unique to the Koori region were possum skin cloaks, traditionally gifted to Koori newborns. The cloaks were embellished with the markings of the newborn's clan and family, and were added to as the child grew, to represent a kind of Koori autobiography. Although the craft of possum skin cloaks has declined, it is being revived by contemporary Koori artists such as Kelly Kumalatsos. The Koori region is home to a number of traditional Indigenous languages. The state of Victoria has speakers of 38 Aboriginal languages, while New South Wales has historically been home to more than 70. However, the number of Kooris who report speaking an Indigenous language at home is low. Only 0.8% of New South Wales and 1% of Victorian Kooris speak an Indigenous language in the home, being the lowest rates of Indigenous language usage outside of Tasmania. There are some attempts to revive Koori languages. In New South Wales, the number of Koori families speaking an Indigenous language at home is on the rise. Census data indicates that the number of New South Wales Indigenous language speakers increased by 123% between 2006 and 2016. The New South Wales Government's Aboriginal Languages Act was enacted in 2017 in an attempt to preserve Indigenous languages. In addition to traditional languages, Kooris may also speak Koori English, the dialect of English spoken by Kooris within their communities. The dialect developed from the Pidgin English used by Kooris to communicate with settlers at the time of colonization. It employs non-verbal language cues such as silences, gestures and lip pursing. Some grammatical elements of Koori English may persist from traditional Indigenous languages, such as distinct ways of marking plural nouns. Historical records show Koori birthing rituals involving song, dance, and ceremonial practices. Gunditj Mara Kooris of southwest Victoria record the ritualistic use of sand, heated by fire both to warm the infant and welcome it to country. Records also exist detailing Koori use of medical techniques such as natural pain management, and the teaching of these techniques to European settler women. Historically, birthing trees were essential to Koori birthing rituals. These were trees used as the sites of births, where mothers, families, and communities could congregate to deliver the baby and welcome it to country. Sometimes, the placenta would be buried under the birthing tree to symbolize the newborn's connection to country. A Koori birthing tree in Western Victoria has received status as a significant tree on the Australian Register of the National Trust in recognition of its importance to the Koori population. Great Britain established a penal colony at Botany Bay in New South Wales. The first settlers of this colony arrived in 1788 aboard the First Fleet, beginning the official colonisation of Australia by Europeans. Over the century following colonisation, there occurred a steep decline in the Aboriginal population. Approximations of overall Indigenous population decline range from 80 to 96%, with estimates of around 80% in the Koori region in the first 20 years of contact. Waterloo Creek Massacre. Generally accepted estimates approximate that 2,000 non-Aboriginals, mostly Europeans, and 20,000 Aboriginals were killed in armed conflict between the two groups. This included the Waterloo Creek Massacre on New South Wales Koori territory in 1837, during which an estimated 200 to 300 Kooris were killed. In the 1830s and 40s, the Western District of Victoria was recorded as one of the two worst regions for violence. Sexual violence also occurred, particularly towards Koori women and children, sometimes resulting in death or infertility. Many Kooris also died from epidemics of European diseases to which they had no tolerance. In 1791, all but 2 of the Koori inhabitants of inner Sydney died of smallpox or chickenpox. Another smallpox epidemic affected the New South Wales and Victoria regions in 1830. Deaths also occurred due to sexually transmitted infections, transported to Australia by the settlers. In Port Phillip, Victoria, 2/3 of the Koori population died of sexually transmitted infections. 20th century, the Aborigines Protection Board of New South Wales and Victoria enabled the segregation of Kooris onto government-run missions and reserves. In the 1910s, the board's powers were extended to allow for the removal of Koori children from their families for assimilation into the non-Indigenous population. Some Koori children were placed into white families, while others were sent to labour schools such as the Cootamundra Domestic Training Home for Aboriginal Girls and Kinchela Aboriginal Boys Training Home. This process of segregation and child removal was common throughout Australia and became known as the Stolen Generations. In 1937, New South Wales Koori activist William Ferguson founded the Aborigines Progressive Association in Sydney to protest the oppression of the Aborigines Protection Board. Approximately 1,000 Indigenous Australians attended the organisation's first rally in Sydney on the 26th of January 1938. From the 1970s, the policies of segregation and assimilation began to shift. New South Wales adopted the Aboriginal Child Placement Principle in 1987, mandating that an Indigenous family be chosen for the rehoming of Koori children wherever possible. In 1997, the premiers of both New South Wales and Victoria apologised for the historic mistreatment of Indigenous Australians, including an apology for the stolen generation, and affirmed their commitment to reconciliation. Health of Koori. Statistics show that Koori Australians have poorer health than their non-Koori counterparts, reflected in their lower life expectancy. Across New South Wales and Victoria, non-Koori individuals were expected to live 8 to 10 years longer than Koori individuals between 2015 and 2017. Thus, the Koori population is younger in demographic, with the median age of the New South Wales Koori community being 22, in contrast to 38 for the non-Koori population. In New South Wales, 7.6% of the Indigenous population are profoundly or severely disabled, compared to 5.6% of non-Indigenous individuals, and this gap is widening. Additionally, New South Wales Kooris with a disability tend to be younger. 36% of the Indigenous disabled population in New South Wales is under 25, compared to 12.7% of the non-Indigenous. Education of Koori. They have lower levels of education than their non-Koori counterparts. In New South Wales, Koori children are half as likely to have completed secondary school. In Victoria, only 56.5% of Koori 25 to 34-year-olds have some form of tertiary education, compared to 74.9% of non-Koori individuals. Income of them are more likely to be living below or near the poverty line. Approximately 32.4% of Koori households in New South Wales earn below $500 Australian per week, compared to 22.3% of non-Indigenous. Less than half of New South Wales Kooris own their homes, compared to 70% of non-Koori residents. New South Wales Kooris are less likely to be in the labour force, with an underemployment rate of 43% compared to 35.9% of non-Koori residents. The professional services industry has the highest divergence, with non-Koori employees 3 times as likely to work in this sector. Incarceration rates of Koori Australians are more likely to be incarcerated in both New South Wales and Victoria. In 2019, Koori adults were 9.3 times more likely to be incarcerated in New South Wales than their non-Koori counterparts. In Victoria, they were 14.5 times more likely. These statistics are mirrored in youth detention. In New South Wales, Koori children aged 10 to 17 were 16 times more likely to be in detention on an average day in 2018 and 2019. In Victoria, they were 10 times as likely. Government initiatives for Koori people. New South Wales and Victoria have both introduced initiatives to address these divergences between Koori and non-Koori individuals. In March 2019, both states established a formal partnership with the Australian federal government to address the goals of the Closing the Gap initiative. The partnership also includes representatives from Indigenous activist groups. For more about Indigenous people around the world, please visit to our channel. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe.